Hello and welcome to Instant Transmission, a podcast where we discuss everything Dragon Ball and Krillin's unhealthy relationship with potty humor. Tonight, we're kicking it old school as we go back and revisit the very first official Dragon Ball Z movie release, The Dead Zone. There's no time for explanation. Grab your gear and ready up because we're jumping straight into it. I'm your host, Dayton, and once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Todd.
Hi.
Tonight's discussion is focused on the 1989 Dragon Ball Z movie release, The Dead Zone, which takes place canonically somewhere between the end of the original Dragon Ball series and the beginning of Dragon Ball Z. Todd has rewatched this movie for the first time in decades, and I've never seen this movie before, so we'll see how this movie lives up to expectations, new and old. And with all that covered, was there anything you wanted to add before we got things started, Todd?
The only other little detail that I wanted to bring up, and this is something I think will be interesting for you, Dayton, with your having watched it for the first time, is that a lot of the Dragon Ball Z movies, when they first came out, there's 13 of them with the original run, and a lot of them tend to kind of copy certain arcs within the actual anime or manga story. This one has a lot of parallels, and I was kind of looking for them too, parallels with the Raditz plot line. So I want you to kind of think about that, Dayton, and we'll kind of talk about that as we go into this.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't even think about that watching this, but now that you mention it, there are some things that are pretty spot on, but we'll get into those as we pick up with the very first scene in the movie, which begins with Piccolo screaming at rocks, talking about his revenge on Goku. But before he can finish screaming at those rocks, several dark figures appear and just beat the snot out of him, striking him hard into the ground and blasting him to smithereens with a ki blast. And yeah, this is where the movie, that's how it tells you that where we are in the timeline with Piccolo kind of preparing to fight Goku, because that's something we only really see at the end of Dragon Ball and a little bit at the beginning of Z.
Yeah, I mean, for people who, I think a lot of the Western audience watched Dragon Ball Z before the original Dragon Ball, and we're kind of just thrown into the fact that Piccolo is a bad guy. He's like the antagonist to Goku or whatever the case is, and this kind of starts with that as well, where Piccolo's kind of like expressing, the next time we fight Goku, I'm going to beat you. And there are, I think an interesting detail here is that there are three shadowy figures who beat up Piccolo, but there is a fourth shadowy figure kind of in the background. And it's like this big figure. And I think we actually hear that one kind of talk, expressing something about, I think right off the bat, saying something about getting rid of both Piccolo and specifically getting rid of Kami.
Yeah, this mysterious figure seems to kind of know who these characters are, so it really starts making you think, is this someone we've seen before? How do they know them? But we won't get that answer yet because we're kicking it in with some retro electric guitar alongside what looks like the original Dragon Ball Z opening animation that's on Toonami, like this really weird mashup. Is this real?
It's pretty wild. I will say right off the bat that something that was weird to me watching this, because as Dayton said, it's probably been a good 2 decades since I've seen this movie, but I watched it on VHS tape, like I'm pretty sure it had like old rock, like American licensed music to it. I know some of the later movies did for sure, but I tried to find a version that had the old music from the original dub and I couldn't find it. So all of the music in this to me is new, and I don't know, it just feels very strange.
Yeah, I mean, it was just really bizarre because I'm expecting to hear, like Rock the Dragon. And instead I'm just getting, there's no vocals. It's just electric guitar with the original like opening animation. It feels really weird. Like something's completely missing here. But I mean, this came out before the original Dragon Ball Z series came out. Am I remembering that correctly?
It came out. So the original Dragon Ball Z anime came out, I think it was in April of 1989, and then this movie came out in like July, so like just a few months after the anime had started. So it's like I mean, the anime would have only had, gosh, maybe a dozen episodes at most.
It's such a weird like place for it to come out, and there's a lot of like recycled content that's used both in like the opening and in the actual movie itself. It's such a weird, I don't know, just anomaly. There's no other way for me to describe it other than I don't know what to think. It's definitely not good, but it's not bad either. It's just weird.
I agree. It feels very strange, but it's also kind of like at least the opening is very nostalgic. I mean, unfortunately, we don't get the Rock Your Dragon, which I would have loved, but the animation is what I remember from childhood, so that's fun.
Well, we aside from this intro, things start picking up as we get a scene of Gohan studying outside of his remote home. And one thing I want to point out is whenever we get a shot of like uh Goku's and Chi Chi's home and now Gohan's home, it always feels like it's slightly different than the last time I saw it. I don't know if you've noticed this, but sometimes like the layout just looks a little different. Like this time, the Ox King rolls up at around this time and he's like coming over hills to get there, but usually it's depicted as kind of flat and remote. I don't know where this place is, but the landscape seems to kind of shift a little bit every time we look at it.
That's kind of a funny detail. I hadn't really paid super close attention to that, but now that you're saying that, I think you are right, as in it doesn't always feel exactly the same. It's supposed to feel very remote. They're on, I think it's called Mount Paozu. Uh but yeah, it does kind of change a little bit between scene to scene. The movies
It's
too take a lot of liberties.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a big deal. It just makes me just laugh a little bit because it's always a little bit different how you get there and what the trees look like in the background and stuff. And I mean, shoot, at the end of the Cell Saga, I believe, Piccolo is like overlooking their home as he watches over Gohan from like a hill that's right behind the house, but that hill is not in this scene. Like it's just weird stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with Goku there, who knows how many times the landscape has been remodeled with Kamehamehas and whatever other sort of training. So,
But either way, things get spicy quick as the Ox King gets out of his car and he has all these gifts for Chi Chi and Gohan. When suddenly his eyes just kind of go white and he is unable to speak, and we see him kind of almost choking for a second, and then he falls to his knees and collapses over. And this is where a cloaked figure with red eyes reveals himself and demands the Dragon Ball on Gohan's head.
I there are like subtle little details in here that I really like. I like how, I mean, the vast size difference between Gohan and the Ox King, where the Ox King is like falling forward, having been knocked out, and almost crushes Gohan. It's kind of a really neat visual. And then this like shadowy figure demands the Dragon Ball. I like Chi Chi's role here as she's like, Gohan, get in the house, and she takes a fighting stance. I'm like, yes, that's awesome.
I love it because this is an era where I feel like they haven't forgotten about Chi Chi actually being a badass. And I love that she takes that fighting stance. Oh, another little note I want to bring up too here is I thought it was really interesting that they used Goku's like Dragon Ball voice actor to voice Gohan here. You can tell it's the exact same voice from Kid Goku and Kid Gohan. I don't know if you noticed that, but it's the exact same, at least from what I could hear.
Okay. I'd have to go back and double check that. You might be right. I was thinking that, man, that Gohan voice honestly sounded weird to me now because I've watched so much Dragon Ball Z Abridged, and we just got done watching Dragon Ball Z Kai, which uses a completely different voice actor for Gohan. But yeah, you might be right. I didn't actually piece that together.
Yeah, I just thought that was an interesting. It sounded the exact same to me, so maybe I'm off, but it just for some reason that original Dragon Ball voice really sticks out in my head. But yeah, the cool thing about this is Chi Chi takes her stance, gets Gohan to safety or tries to, but that's interrupted when several more henchmen pop up and surround Chi Chi. And I love it because Chi Chi kind of just takes note of all of them and goes, "Yeah, I'm kicking your ass anyway." And then she just goes in on the attack. And I like kind of the smooth animation of her feet shifting as she moves her hips forward and actually like it feels very mechanically sound the way they animated her kind of leaping into action. It's like a small detail, the way her heel kind of shifts over, but I like that kind of stuff.
That see, I didn't make a close note of that, but I I think you're right. I think that there's some really cool fight scenes and choreography in this movie moving forward, and it feels very much akin to the era at the tail end of Dragon Ball, as well as like a little bit of the beginning of Dragon Ball Z, and I really like that era of combat.
Yeah, it's this nice blend of we're going to give you good animation and attention to detail, but we're also going to give you that kind of the speed is off the charts and overwhelming, and we're going to give you that sense of power and just well, I don't know, agility. And unfortunately, this moment of power and agility doesn't last for very long as the cloaked figure more or less raises his hand and with I guess an invisible just kind of key burst, Chi-Chi's knocked to the floor. And upon this happening, Goku, who's somewhere nearby in a river, senses this and jumps up butt ass naked and starts running towards his home.
Yeah, I mean, I love this. I love that a lot of these. I mean, we frequently get to see Goku out like fishing. He's got this fish in hand that's larger than he is. And yeah, he just hops out of the water with his buns hanging out in the air. But he clearly senses something's wrong, and he arrives on scene with these three bad guys who are trying to get the Dragon Ball now absent from the scene, and also Chi Chi, as Goku kind of like grabs her on the ground, she says, "They took Gohan. They were after the Dragon Balls."
Yeah, I think that lines up with one of the similarities to Raditz that you had brought up. We have mysterious person shows up and steals your kid, so that's already a pretty strong parallel.
Yes, and yeah, I definitely want to kind of touch on those as we move through this. Well, in this next scene, I think that there's another parallel, actually, to a what I would say a different part of Dragon Ball, but this one feels like it takes a lot from the Raditz scene, and we'll see that with like Piccolo and Goku and stuff moving forward.
Yeah, and from here we cut to some evil floating castle thing. I don't know what the hell it is, but it's a castle in the clouds and it's very evil. And some Pilaf looking mofo explains to his subordinates that he's after the Dragon Balls for immortality and that he's only two away from having them all. So we're just getting like beats and information points. This movie is moving at breakneck speed. I don't know if you felt that way at this point.
It's quick. They don't waste any time. I'll say that for sure. You actually kind of just off the cuff pointed out the other what I would call another minor detail that they kind of steal from a different part of Dragon Ball, in that the character design for what we find to be Garlic Jr. here is very reminiscent of Pilaf. Like, he has very similar character design, somewhat similar in the like type of voice. I would say it doesn't really fall into any other of like the Pilaf categories though, because we find that this character is much more serious than our gag character Pilaf.
Yeah, I mean, well, this character is effective already because he's already gotten most of the Dragon Balls. His subordinates actually listen to him and are powerful. And I mean, this is interesting where it's at this point Gohan's crying to be released. And when they tell him to kind of, pipe up, he tells them that his father is Goku and that they'll be sorry. And Garlic, like the henchmen laugh, but Garlic's kind of like taking a note of that, like, all right, I kind of know who this guy is, so I'm definitely going to keep an eye on you. And on top of that, I sense a deep energy in you, and I think I'm going to make you my disciple, which is a really interesting turn.
Yeah, that's a good detail. I actually really like here that Garlic Jr. at least knows of Goku. Like, we kind of get the impression that, well, we'll find out a little bit more about Garlic Jr.'s story here, but we get the impression that he's like kind of new to the scene. but Goku did defeat Piccolo. And so that apparently that news has spread. I mean, it was in like the World Martial Arts Tournament and everything, but I mean, Piccolo was also effectively not only trying to win that tournament, but using that tournament as a catalyst to defeat Goku and basically take over the world.
Yeah, because I mean, Piccolo was wiping out major cities and had wiped out, I think, like a percentage of humanity at some point during the original Dragon Ball series. Like he was the first character we had seen take an entire landscape and turn it into ash and nothingness. So up till this point, he's probably one of the like probably most widely known villains and most destructive villains that the planet had ever seen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so that definitely catches Garlic Jr.'s attention here. But they basically Garlic Jr. says, "Okay, we've got 5 Dragon Balls." Tells his minions like, "All right, go find the last 2. We need to do this quickly." I will say too, it's interesting. I mean, if anybody has watched the DBZ abridged Team 4-Star version of this movie, they point out a lot of things that are both kind of funny and weird. First off, why did they kidnap Gohan? Like, why did they take him and not just take the Dragon Ball? Like, he had it on a hat. They could have easily snatched the hat and just fucked off.
Yeah, I mean, and it wouldn't take much to explain it what or something like he won't let go of the hat and for some reason they can't get it out of his hand, so they just steal him. I mean, that would make sense. Everyone would believe that. Also, it would kind of allude to some things that happen later, like, so that would have been clever storytelling. Instead, they just stole the entire kid.
Yeah. One other thing that I kind of forgot to mention is that we kind of at the very beginning we talked about how these same guys, these minions of Garlic Jr. and Garlic Jr. himself, attacked Piccolo in an attempt to kill him in order to basically trying to kill Piccolo to kill Kami was the goal. But at least we as the audience know, especially having knowledge of Dragon Ball Z, doing that will also make the Dragon Balls inactive. So Garlic Jr. wants the Dragon Balls to get his wish, but he tried to kill Piccolo and kill Kami beforehand, which would have made the Dragon Balls inert. The only thing there I could assume is that is a piece of information that Garlic Jr. didn't have or did not know.
And to me, that's a really believable piece of information for him not to know, right? Especially
Yes.
knowing what we know in the future. Because I mean, that's an incredibly specific detail that you would like need to know about somebody. So we know that at this point, if we use that as actual canon, we know that this character knows who Kami is, but doesn't necessarily know everything about Kami. So you've got like this weird, like, knows the person, but maybe doesn't know him super well. I don't know. Maybe
Right.
I'm reading too much into it.
Yeah, and I'm getting a little nitpicky too, but if they had succeeded in killing Kami, it would have messed up Garlic Jr.'s plan to get and use the Dragon Balls for his wish. I'd kind of be curious to, as we move through the story here, maybe at the tail end, to kind of discuss that and what that might have even looked like if they had succeeded, because it would have changed how this story went quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, it would have. Yeah, put a pin in that.
Yeah.
We're going to go ahead and keep going forward, though, as Goku arrives at Kame House to utilize Bulma's Dragon Radar to track down where Gohan went, because, Gohan had the Dragon Ball. And there are a few others there, like Roshi and Krillin. But Goku opts to take this battle on his own, so he grabs the radar, jumps on good old flying Nimbus, because remember, Goku doesn't fly yet, which I think is one of the coolest, like, eras of Dragon Ball kind of talking about that.
Same.
I don't know why, but when the characters are more like grounded and you're actually able to use the terrain as like a feature, I think the battles just look so much more dynamic. It's just something special about it. But I'm going off on a tangent here.
No, I agree with you. And we're pretty quickly here going to get into some of the really cool combat.
Yes, like Gohan eating an evil apple and getting drunk.
Yeah, the highlight of this movie is Gohan's little song and dance number as he gets drunk on this apple. This part feels a little weird. It feels, I don't know, a little childish. Not sure why it's in here even, but oh well. That kind of pulls us past that into, I think basically Goku arriving on scene. Or actually, no, I'm sorry, I'm skipping past that. Garlic Jr. and his henchmen get all of the Dragon Balls collected, and they do now, in fact, summon Shenron to grant Garlic Jr.'s wish.
Yeah, this is moving fast because, I mean, we spent like half of the original Dragon Ball season just hunting down the Dragon Balls themselves. And these henchmen were able to find all 7 Dragon Balls in about, I don't know, 10 minutes of movie time, if. And I mean, they got them together. They're summoning the dragon. Goku's almost there. He can see this evil palace thing, and he watches the dragon get summoned. And to everyone's surprise, well, mostly mine, Garlic Jr. wishes to be immortal and is actually granted the wish. So you hear about immortality a lot throughout Dragon Ball Z. This is the first time I can think of where someone wished for and was granted immortality, at least on screen. Can you think of anyone else?
I think this is the only time. There's one other wish that is maybe somewhat similar in the manga, but not quite the same thing. So yeah, it's fun to actually see one of the bad guys succeed and actually become immortal. And now we have to kind of like, the rest of the movie is basically going to be, how do our heroes overcome that sort of obstacle?
Well, we're going to find out real quick, because as soon as this wish is done being made, Goku leaps onto the scene and demands his son back. But in a interesting plot twist, Kame also just kind of shows up out of the blue, and we get kind of the background information on how this Garlic Jr. fella and Kame, like, what their relationship is, which is 300 years ago, Garlic's father had competed with him for the seat of Earth's protector. And when Garlic wasn't picked, he tried to take the seat by force and was sealed away for all of eternity.
What did you think about, how did you feel about this, how they kind of fleshed out the story and connected the bad guy to basically lore that we as Dragon Ball fans already know, Dayton?
Yeah, I didn't mind it. I was interested in, because they gave us some specific numbers, and I'm always weird about that when they give us specific numbers. When they said 300 years ago, I'm like, does that line up with everything else I've seen? Because I thought Kame was really freaking old. But I mean, I also like the idea of the fact that, you know, Kame did had to compete with somebody, and that there was kind of a fallout to that. And so, I mean, it's interesting, but also this is like that character's son, so it's not like a direct relationship. I'm all over the place. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. I mean, even you could even kind of draw parallels between like King Piccolo and Piccolo Jr. to Garlic Sr. and Garlic Jr. Like, Garlic Jr. is kind of here as the surrogate for his father to get revenge on Kami, whereas that was kind of the case with King Piccolo to Piccolo Jr. to get revenge on Goku. I don't know. I agree. It's fine. Like, I like that they at least tried to tie this plot into the lore of Dragon Ball rather than just, like, I don't know, making something that didn't feel, that felt entirely disconnected from the world. I think it's cool to have it at least embedded in the lore.
I think I more or less agree with you. I also like that it gives other characters like some history that's their own sort of thing. Like,
right.
Sometimes it feels like history happens because it's necessary for the plots revolving around our main characters, where this is just something that just happened in Kame's background, and now it's just kind of coming back and everyone has to deal with it. And it makes the world just feel a little bit more alive, like it's not just written for the main characters.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It does help flesh out Kami a little bit. But this kind of turns into, now that we've got the backstory, Goku's like, I don't give a shit about your guys' feud. I'm here for my son. Where's my kid? And he immediately is kind of like, oh, he's in the castle somewhere. So he darts past all the bad guys and flies into the castle with the minions hot on his heels.
Yeah, and this is where Goku gets caught by the minions, and we get the grand minion introduction. And their names are Ginger, Nikki, and Sancho. And is there a theme to these names, or are they just names?
I'm pretty sure they are supposed to be spices. Or sometimes it's confusing because the dubs will take some liberties with their names and how their names are pronounced. These ones might actually just be more closer to foods, because we've got Ginger, which is an obvious one, right? I don't know what the hell Nikki is supposed to be. I know later on when he's like saying one of his moves, he says tutti frutti, whatever that means.
That. I forgot about that.
And then the other one, shoot, is Nikki and what was it? Sancho? Is that it?
Yeah.
He just says when he powers up, he says cheese, which I don't know. I thought they were all supposed to be like spices of some sort to connect with garlic, right?
I mean, if his name was Nacho Cheese would make sense to me, but this is Sancho. Maybe it's supposed to be something like Nacho. I don't know.
It could be an anagram of Nacho, right? Sancho has all the same letters, so you might be on to something there. That actually might be it.
To be continued. Actually, we'll never follow up on this. Don't even look for it. But Goku attempts to flee past them and is grabbed and forced to fight. And this is where all the henchmen like beef up. Like they all get super ripped and rip out of their clothes and their muscles are bulging. And I mean, they're ready to throw down.
Yeah, this is interesting. A couple things here I wanted to ask your opinion on, Dayton. One, so a lot of times the movie characters, especially like the bad guys and the minions and stuff, as best I understand, they usually are not created by Akira Toriyama. They are usually created by the team, like the anime team at Toei Animation. So how did you feel about the character designs for the minions here?
I was kind of, I guess, lukewarm about them. As far as interaction goes, we don't get a ton of interaction with these characters. They actually don't have a lot of dialogue in general. A lot of it is just sort of, yes, sir, yes, master, or whatever. So if they do have better personalities, we don't really get time to interact with that. So I do have to knock something in there just because I don't get to know them. As far as visually, they felt kind of samey to me in a weird way, where sometimes I like picking out characters and being like, oh, I like this design. I like the way this looks. Part of it too is just we're in a dark setting, kind of like in this ruined looking castle thing. And then a lot of their characters are like dark green and stuff like that. So they don't stick out very much. So they're also just kind of hard to even like see in here.
Yeah, I think I largely agree with you. I kind of like the designs being like this almost demonic feel to them. The kind of like what I would call the main minion, the kind of like olive green looking guy. He has almost like this like demon bat look to him, which it's kind of generic, but I also kind of like it. I like when Dragon Ball actually gives us more as far as like the demon world and stuff like that. So I kind of like that part. But yeah, otherwise their designs are they're okay. They're kind of unremarkable. As far as characters, they're very unremarkable. They have almost no personality, but I mean, it is a 40-minute movie.
I will say there is a scene that happens not too far in the future that I absolutely love. And so it makes me kind of like these characters because it gave me this scene. So you probably know the one I'm talking about, but
I think so.
I'm excited to get there.
Yes, definitely. But right before that, as these guys kind of chase Goku into the castle, they start a full brawl because Goku can't get to his son. Um, I actually, even some of these parts, I really enjoy. There's a moment where like Goku tries to leap away from them, and one of them grabs him by the ankles, and Goku gets his chin just slammed into one of the banisters. Like some of these moments of violence are brutal, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, we're shown very well the struggle that's happening. There's a moment where all three of them are kind of dashing around Goku, and I like how they show Goku's body kind of turning and moving with the villains as they circle him, and you see his eyes kind of darting back and forth, kind of looking where the next strike is going to come from, and then blocking as they're coming in. I mean, I love it. It's Goku showing patience, it's showing mastery over martial arts and fighting very conservatively at this point. And I mean, it's such a brief scene, but I think it's just the little details are so well done here.
It's really cool. They even like they use sort of some speed lines and stuff, and sometimes like flashing fists, but I think it's used in a very good way here, because it's not overused. There's no repeat animations. It's like you said, you even though you had the speed lines going around Goku, you get to watch Goku like paying attention to his surroundings. It's actually really fun to watch.
And
But
I'm also going to be a little nicer to this than maybe some of the other movies, because I could tell pretty early that this wasn't like a full length feature product with like a full budget. This is a 40-minute like movie. I'm going to use movie in quotes here. You could call it like a special if you really wanted, but you could tell that there were some animation like cuts that they had to make at certain points, but they've done it very well in a way where it's not distracting. And I don't know. I think they utilized what resources they had very well. The things that need to look good. And where something could have been animated better, it doesn't bother me. I think this was a very good use of resources as far as a limited animation team.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. This fight actually kind of gets to a point where Goku actually does get the upper hand against these three guys, kind of like knocks each of them around after kind of analyzing the fight. They do kind of try to catch Goku by surprise, though, as two of them get up, firing off ki blasts at him, and Goku is kind of saved in the moment by two intercepting ki blasts, as we get to see the entrance of our main bald man, Krill Dog.
That's my guy. Yeah. Krillin actually has kind of a badass entrance when he knocks the ki blast out of the air and he's just standing at like the top of these steps, a little bit of a smirk on his face. He knows he's a badass. Piccolo shows up at around this point as well. And this is where I'm going to ding it. Krillin is told to go get Gohan and leave. But before that happens, Gohan pees off a balcony right onto Krillin's head, and it kind of looked like into his mouth a little bit.
Absolutely was into his mouth. Are you dinging it for the potty humor?
I'm dinging it for everything dealing with Krillin in this show. He got one cool little scene, and then they peed on him and told him to leave.
Yeah. Unfortunately, so I mentioned earlier, there are 13 Dragon Ball Z movies. This is kind of a common theme in the Z movies for Krillin. And I don't mean
and
being
all
peed
of them?
on.
Come on, don't tell me that right now. We're on number one.
He has a couple of moments later, not in this movie, but in some of the later movies, but he, for the most part, is kind of like the slapstick comedy for the movies, unfortunately.
Oh, jeez. All right. Well, anyway, let's not talk about that anymore. So Krillin has his mission, but we cut outside for a moment where Kame and Garlic actually begin their battle. And despite Kame having really cool laser eyes, by the way, I thought that was badass. He still kind of gets his shit kicked in. Like, it's a really one-sided looking fight.
Yeah, for the most part. I was so torn on this fight in particular because I like getting to see Kami fight because we very rarely see it, only pretty much at the very tail end of Dragon Ball. But it's funny seeing this fight after watching Kami fight in the World Martial Arts Tournament at the end of Dragon Ball. I think it's the 23rd. But because Kami is a complete martial arts badass in that tournament. And here, like, his laser eyes are cool, but otherwise he just kind of feels like an old man fighting this little demon guy. He doesn't have anything cool, fancy, or special in his fight.
Yeah, I would have hoped for a little bit more. I really feel like this is probably one of those things where you only have so much animation budget, and that fight's not really important.
Right.
It's also, the scenes are very brief. We spend hardly any time. There might be a full minute altogether of Kame and Garlic actually fighting. So it's very brief. Would it have been nice to see more? Absolutely. I would love to see all the weird, crazy, just like martial arts master stuff that old man could pull out, but unfortunately we don't get to see it here.
Yeah. And we do kind of transition back over to the interior of the castle where Krillin's trying to nab Gohan, who has now shown up as kind of like walking around drunkenly. One of the minions tries to stop Krillin, but gets blown through the floor by Piccolo, and Piccolo kind of gets to have his comeuppance against this minion in another very brief but kind of fun fight, as you know, Piccolo going one-on-one against this guy completely outclasses him, dodging all of his attacks, blocking one, like sending him into the wall with a massive punch, and then just blasting him, not even like a no-look key blast that just murders this minion.
Like, the final moment of this scene is fantastic, as we kind of get this like looking down to Piccolo view, and we see this evil henchman's feet just like come swinging in from like off scene after Piccolo blasts them, and you see them just kind of dangling there lifeless. It's so, I mean, the shot is so good. I have to give him so much credit on this because it tells so much story with so little screen time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It does a really good job with kind of like what you would almost consider dynamic camera angles, which I really enjoyed. We, I think we get like just a brief scene of Kami kind of like blasting Garlic Jr., but I think this is the scene that you were talking about that comes up next, Dayton, is this action sequence between Goku and the remaining two minions as they pull the minions. What I think is super cool, they pull out of their bodies these blades, like these swords that you can see the handles almost look like parts of their skin, but also look like bone. And they just go on the full assault against Goku, who pulls out his power pole.
Yeah, I mean, these are some of the scenes that we see used in the Dragon Ball Z intro. Like, and I didn't realize how good the scene was. Because as these two go in on the attack, we see Goku trying to like dodge the attacks, kind of leaning to the side as like a chunk of his hair gets cut off his head. There's a moment where they're coming at him from both sides, and he pulls up the power pole to block one and then leans over and gets the sheath to the power pole to block the other attack. And then he ducks low and then extends the power pole back, knocking one of the henchmen clear off the platform they're fighting and into like a nearby structure. It's so good. Like, it's 30 seconds of just pure Dragon Ball Z goodness. I love scenes like this because you're right. This is kind of going back to like Dragon Ball with that really in-depth choreography, but we get some of the Z like speed lines and movement and power representation. This is, I think, that blend at its zenith at this point.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, man, it's like I could talk about the scene. Like you said, it's maybe 30 seconds to a minute, but it is so good. Like, there's just one shot of like 5 seconds, maybe even less, of Goku just dodging the weapons, like the swords coming at him, and he's like, it's so rapid where he's like tucks under one, like throws his legs over another one, like rolls onto the ground to get away from it. It's such a smooth, like it feels like you're watching a Jackie Chan movie or something. It is so well animated, and just the choreography is phenomenal. I love this sequence.
Yeah, and the whole thing it's capped off with The one henchman who wasn't knocked into a nearby structure kind of leaps into the air and prepares to fire off his own ki blast at Goku, who puts his hands together and fires off a Kamehameha blast, punching right through the ki blast heading towards him, punching straight into that henchman, and then just slamming him down into his other friend who was, already in bad shape, kind of exploding the two, bringing down the structure on top of them. And we see one of their hands kind of poking at the top, like grasping for life for a moment and then going limp.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is cool. The only thing that I'll say about this is that I was mentally comparing the Kamehameha finisher here to some of the Kamehamehas that we saw at the tail end of Dragon Ball. And this one doesn't, it's not super spectacular. It's fun to see Goku finish these guys off with a Kamehameha. It just wasn't, it's not going to be in my top 10 favorite Kamehamehas, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's mediocre. It's not bad. Like there are some Kamehamehas where I look at them like that was sad and pathetic. This one's not that. It's just not anything over the top. And you kind of want the Kamehameha wave to feel special every time you see it. Unfortunately, that is not the case at all. This one gets like
Right.
a 5 out of 10 on my Kamehameha scale.
That's probably about right. But that basically dispatches all of our minions, and we kind of cut back over to Kami and Garlic Jr. Kami kind of on his last leg here, getting ready to basically sacrifice himself to effectively blow himself up to try to take out Garlic Jr. And Garlic Jr. is just taunting him like, I'm immortal. What do you not get about that?
But I mean, Kami's still thinking about doing it because he can't just sit by and do nothing, right? And so, I mean, this thing is about to happen. We're about to have a Kami bomb. That is until Goku and Piccolo arrive and decide to take the fight from here. And this is where we see Garlic actually starts to take things seriously as he screams and powers up, and we see his size increase by like tenfold because he was like this little, Pilaf looking short guy. And now he's like, I don't know, 12 feet tall and just jacked. So this is the final boss. We get to see him and things are about to get visceral.
One detail that was interesting to me that I never noticed as a kid is that in that very first scene where Piccolo gets beat up by the three shadowy figures, there's actually that fourth shadowy figure in the background. And if you look closely, it's actually Garlic Jr. in his big form. And I never noticed that before. I thought it was interesting, especially because the dub at least uses his voice changes between the small form and the big form, but they use his small form voice in that scene, even though he's in his big form, probably so they're not giving anything away. But I don't know. I just thought it was interesting that they kind of allude to the fact that he does have this big transformation, even in the first like minute of the movie.
I guess I didn't even think about that. So yeah, that's actually good storytelling. So I do have to give them props for that, where they kind of, they lay out the breadcrumbs in front of you. And we've said this before. Sometimes the story in Dragon Ball is not very deep, but they gave us a question and they gave us some breadcrumbs, and yeah, they get full points in trying to do something.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And this kind of results in the battle now between Goku and Piccolo versus Big Garlic Jr. I do want to point out this is going to be another, to me, what is another parallel between this movie and the Raditz arc, because they're basically taking Goku and Piccolo, these two rivals or enemies, whatever you want to call them, and they have to work together to defeat this stronger villain.
And honestly, this is a trope that happens a few times in Dragon Ball where people are forced to become unlikely allies. But this is very specifically Piccolo and Goku. So I think it's very fair to draw that parallel, even though we've seen things like this happen before.
Yeah, I think I mean, it doesn't help its case given the fact that they're both basically, well, Piccolo's not necessarily here to save Gohan, but you have Gohan who's kind of been taken by the bad guys, and Goku and Piccolo have to fight together against that bad guy who has taken Gohan. Yeah, I mean, it's different enough, but there's a lot of parallel lines that you can piece together here.
One thing I will say is I like the way that this one kind of kicks off, though, as Goku and Piccolo kind of struggle against Garlic, but things we need to move maps. Like we've been fighting on this map for too long, so Garlic grabs both of them, and there's a scene where you show them like kicking and like punching at Garlic's wrists as he just like grabs both of them by like their heads and then just slams through the exterior wall of the building that they're in, kind of smashing through it and plummeting to the ground. And just, I don't know, just you get this like big, brutish kind of overwhelming strength feel from this. And I just love seeing them trying to struggle against it. But Garlic, he's just too strong.
Yeah. I mean, this is super interesting. We're like you said, we've switched maps, so we're kind of fighting on the outside of the castle now, and Goku and Piccolo are about to take this shit seriously, and we know they're taking it seriously because, as you've mentioned in the past, Dayton, it is shirtless time.
That's how we're kicking things up. So Goku takes his shirt and shoes off because you can't fight with shoes on either. That's just that's too much. And then Piccolo takes like his cape thing off, cape shoulders, whatever you want to call that thing, and his turban off. So everyone's at their maximum power now. Garlic is big and strong. Goku shirtless. Piccolo hatless. All right. So I don't know why. It makes me laugh every time. But with this renewed speed, because as we all know, all that's weighted training gear, right? It's funny to forget that, but that's the real point in doing all this for these characters. They take off all this weighted training clothes, and they're coming at Garlic faster than he's able to really register, and they catch him off guard and actually start landing just a series of blows. And then they follow it up with this kind of like combo key attack that knocks Garlic way off into the distance into another structure that explodes and tumbles down on top of him.
Yeah, and they are heroes in this case kind of assume they're like, oh, we won, like, which is kind of funny, but they kind of turn on each other. Piccolo's like, Goku, you and I have something to settle at this point. And as they kind of charge at one another, they are interrupted by the immortal Garlic Jr. coming out of the rubble.
I do want to just comment on this real quick because this movie's moving at incredible pace. So it's like the dust hasn't even settled on Garlic's little crater over there, and Piccolo starting a fight with Goku. Like it's like 3 seconds of just like, we knocked him back. All right, we're fighting. I mean, it's really jarring to me because of how fast this is moving.
It is a little bit funny. I think because I've seen it before, I didn't even think about how fast the pacing in that way feels. But yes, you're absolutely right. But Goku and Piccolo are thoroughly interrupted as Garlic Jr. now starts powering up, this aura kind of glowing around him, and this vortex kind of swirling in the sky of these reds and orange and black colors. And he opens up what we are told is the dead zone, the namesake of the movie. It looks like this kind of like black fanged mouth that everyone is now kind of getting sucked into.
Now, if I remember correctly, this is where they reveal that this was the like dimension that his father was sealed away into, if I understand correctly.
Yes. Like that was what I remembered, and I was like paying attention to the details here too. It's interesting because I think at the tail end, Kami says something along the lines of like, oh, it's ironic that Garlic Jr., the same fate ended up with Garlic Jr. as his father, but they never explicitly say. They basically say that Kami's predecessor, the Guardian of Earth, sealed Garlic Sr. away, but they don't specifically state that it was in the dead zone.
Yeah, it would have been neat to kind of like mention that earlier, and then we come back and like, oh shoot, now he's going to do it to them sort of thing. It just feels really weird that all this is kind of, I don't know, like just kind of dropped on us all at once, where it's just like, oh, well, shoot, it would have been cool to like know about the dead zone earlier and then be spooked out by the dead zone. And then in like the fourth quarter, bring it out and show it to us all.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it very much should have been alluded to sooner. It feels there's this part to me is maybe the weakest part of the entire movie. It feels very strange that Garlic Jr. Has access to the dead zone. We don't really know exactly what the dead zone is.
We know it's a realm of eternal darkness where his father was sealed away.
See, now, are you getting, like, with his where his father was sealed away, are you getting that from the dialogue in the movie, or where did you get that from?
I got that from the dialogue in the movie. I just write it down when I hear it.
Okay. Maybe they do specify that. I thought that they didn't explicitly state that it was the dead zone his father got sealed in, but
it's just like a comment as he's summoning the dead zone. Like it's just kind of knowledge soup that's suddenly being thrust upon me, where it's just like, oh, by the way, here's the dead zone. Here's where my father was sealed away at, and now I'm going to suck all of you into it. And it's just like, what? Why can you summon the dead zone? What is happening here? This feels like out of left field.
That's the other part that's weird. Not to mention the fact that, like you said, why can Garlic Jr. open the dead zone? If he can open the dead zone, is there not a way for the creatures that are inside the dead zone to come out of the dead zone? Like, could he not just get his father
There
out?
is. You just have to yell really loudly.
God damn it.
Sorry, that was a Boo reference.
So it creates too many questions that there are never going to be answers for, and it just feels like a mess.
Let's okay, there's not a whole lot left in the movie, so let's get through it, and then because that's an entire discussion point for me. So at this point, the dead zone hole, the zone hole is summoned and starts just sucking everything into it. It looks like Garlic has to kind of like maintain focus to keep this hole open, right? Something like that. Everyone starts getting sucked into it. Goku and Piccolo are still barely able to hold on. Krillin's barely able to hold on. And I mean, from a pile of rubble, we hear the screams of a pissed off Gohan who bursts out of it and reveals himself. And Garlic realizes that this kid's going to be a problem. There's a lot of energy coming from this kid. And he starts trying to, like, I don't know, like get him with Ki Blast. It wasn't exactly clear what he was trying to do to Gohan.
It felt to me like he was like increasing the power of the suction from the dead zone, and Gohan was having to
harder. I mean,
that's part of the movie. Everybody, we didn't. It's not our fault.
Hey, it wasn't my idea. It was
Dragon Ball's idea. But as they try to really suck this kid,
just double down.
Gohan manages to resist the pull into the dead zone and just unleashes this aura of this just vast Ki Blast that surrounds his body and just like knocks Garlic Jr. into the dead zone himself.
Now, just to make sure we watched the same movie, was this Ki Blast like a half a second? Like, was it just like a boom and then it was over? Like, there wasn't like this big animation, no struggle, no nothing. It was just like it just kind of happens.
Yes. Man, you said that you have not watched the Team 4-Star version of this, right?
No, but I feel like this is going to give a lot of context when I do.
Yeah. It's funny watching this after, like, I've watched the Team 4-Star version more recently, and they make this joke of like they speed up the Ki Blast even from the norm. So it's just like and Garlic Jr. is dead. But I didn't realize how fast it was in the original animation is like you said, it feels like it's just a split second. Like, the fact that Team 4-Star was even able to speed it up is kind of remarkable because it's so fast.
I mean, and honestly, the movie pretty much ends at that point. Like, Garlic is sucked into the dead zone. It closes. Piccolo vows to get even with Goku, and then Gohan kind of wakes up after all this, with, after expelling all of his power, seemingly. And he doesn't remember what happened. He just assumed that Goku saved the day. And that's it. That's the end of the movie right there.
Yeah, I do also want to point out that is Gohan's involvement in this conflict is another parallel to Raditz. Like when Gohan basically headbutts Raditz and, you know, damages him, breaks through his armor, all that stuff. Um, but we're kind of getting that both in the movie and in the Raditz arc. We're getting that peek at this latent power that Gohan has.
Yeah, that one's definitely on the nose, especially with kind of Gohan being a catalyst for winning the overall battle, right? That explosive moment that kind of set up our heroes to win. And with Raditz, he wasn't the final blow, whereas in this he is, sort of thing. So it's a little bit different, but the
Right.
parallels are very, very strong. I'm actually glad you brought that up before we started getting into this, because the moments that line up almost 100%.
Yeah, quite a bit. And yeah, it has enough differences to make it a worthwhile watch, I think. Yeah, basically, the tail end is just Goku and Gohan flying home on the Nimbus. And the one thing that I actually do really like about the way the credits roll is that the moment we kind of skipped over it, but just the details of the moment where Garlic Jr. gets sucked into the dead zone, and then the dead zone kind of it basically shatters. Like you kind of get this visual of like the sky shattering into a bunch of pieces of glass. And then as the credits roll, you get this visual of like this kind of diminutive form of Garlic Jr. like banging on one of these shattered pieces of glass of the dead zone itself, which is just a really cool visual of him being like imprisoned in the dead zone.
I mean, it's a hell of an imprisonment too. It's a realm of eternal darkness, and he's immortal. He's there for all of eternity in nothingness. Like I that's probably one of the worst fates anyone could be condemned to. And I mean, the thing is in a sweet twist of irony, he did all of that to himself. All of this was his own decision making.
Yeah. I mean, the credits have rolled. I kind of want to talk about this as a whole, and we already kind of touched on the dead zone. That to me is the worst part of this movie. The dead zone itself, ironically, the name of the movie. Just the fact that Garlic Jr. summons the one thing that is basically his downfall, and you're kind of like, why does he have this technique? Can his father not just get out of there? Like, can he not go in there and get his father? Like, there's so many little questions, and on top of the fact that it's like, okay, why did you feel the need to use that? Like, why not just use your immortality and wear these guys down? Like, they're gonna get tired. They're not gonna be able to hurt you.
Yeah, I like the conclusion they get to. I agree with you. I'm really not a fan of how they got there, because you're right. Why would you summon the dead zone? Also, you guys didn't really explain the dead zone until like it came up at the very end. Like the movie is called The Dead Zone, and we didn't know anything about the dead zone until the last like 10 minutes.
Right. Yes, that's true. The names of the movies are usually, I mean, we're watching the dubbed version. We're also calling them by the dubbed names. The Japanese names are usually something ridiculous and very literal. I don't remember what the Dead Zone's name is. Maybe I can find it quickly, but yeah, it feels strange that it's called the Dead Zone and we didn't know anything about it sooner, and it just kind of ends up being Garlic Jr. bringing up his own downfall.
I mean, that's definitely a Dragon Ball trope, is these villains kind of causing their own demise, right? Like it's the, I can absorb power. Like, all right, well, you're going to absorb power until you explode, sort of thing. It's there are things like that happen all the time in Dragon Ball, where someone's own ambition is what causes them to lose. And you could even say about Cell, because he was so arrogant, he allowed his opponents to train and prepare for him, and it caused a blindside, which caused his downfall. I don't mind where it ended, but I do agree that it really didn't feel like it didn't feel natural how we got there. You're right. The dead zone was never brought up. It was never really explained well at all. And you're right. He's an immortal being. Why not lean on that more? I guess maybe you could argue that he's freshly immortal and maybe he wasn't, thinking about his immortality enough. But yeah, I will say I think the way that they handled Garlic is probably the biggest low, just because I actually enjoyed the fight with the henchman way more than the fight with Garlic.
I was gonna say the same thing. It's not a terrible fight with Garlic Jr., but it's also just bland. Like there's nothing really that sticks out to me. I kind of like I like Garlic Jr. like grabbing Goku and Piccolo and them kind of like punching him and him not being bothered, and then him kind of like slamming them through the wall and down through a bridge. That's kind of cool. There's a brief moment like when Goku and Piccolo take off their weighted clothing, where they're all like Goku and Piccolo are like using the after image technique along with Garlic Jr., and they're all kind of like after imaging to attack one another. That's kind of neat, but nothing that stands up to the minion fight 5 minutes before that.
Yeah, it's wild to me that I had so much fun watching the minions fight Goku and even the Piccolo. Even though it was kind of a one-sided beatdown, it was still fun and there were some good shots in there. But you're right. Garlic, that all that should have been kind of the appetizer to the big baddie. And I feel a little let down by that fight. I wanted more. There were some bones there that they could have worked with, but I mean, outside of the dead zone technique, Garlic didn't do anything other than just kind of punch him and then get punched and then summon his own defeat. So I think you're right. I think the actual final battle was kind of disappointing, but the minion fight was fun. And I don't know. It's hard for me to really be terribly upset when it's a 40-minute flick. And I got to say, the way things moved and how fast it was, even though the ending was kind of disappointing, it's such a quick and fun watch that I actually enjoyed myself.
I'll be honest. Yeah, you mentioned you were curious to see like my take on it from, watching it 20 years ago to now. I actually remember this movie as being one of my probably one of my favorite Dragon Ball Z movies. I think the first three of the Dragon Ball Z movies I always have a fond memory of, because they still keep that original Dragon Ball kind of like fighting. There's a lot of really good choreography, and you do get that here with the minions. I will say though that I think my memory of it was greater than my experience of it this time. While I still really enjoyed it, I think the thing that actually kind of dropped it down for me was what we just talked about with the Garlic Jr. fight, because the fights with the minions are super cool. I really, really enjoyed them. But as you said, Dayton, that should be the appetizer for the main course that is the fight with Garlic Jr. And the Garlic Jr. fight is kind of a letdown as a result.
Yeah, and I mean, uh, it kind of sets your expectations pretty high, and then when the fight itself, it's not a great fight. It's pretty unremarkable. Um, it's not the worst fight in Dragon Ball either, though. But
Right.
you're really hoping for more, and like I said, I'm being a little easier on this one because one, it's not a full length movie feature. It's 40 minutes. It's probably like a TV special or whatever that they put on VHS. And two, I feel like they didn't have like the big budget that they probably would have needed to do all these cool and awesome things. So it kind of sucks not seeing what that fight could have looked like with a budget. I feel like there's still a lot just sitting on the table that we could have been given, right? There could have been this awesome fight between Garlic and Piccolo and Goku. But right now, I leave it kind of thinking, man, I if I had to describe Garlic's fighting style, uh, Gorilla Man, I don't know. I didn't see any techniques. He's fast at some points, and then he's just brute strength at other points. So I don't really get a beat on that guy.
Yeah, those are all good points. I think, like you said, though, I this is just a fun watch. It's very quick, maybe too quick, but because it's fast, you don't feel like you're wasting any time either. And there's definitely some fun action to be had in here. The tail end is just a little bit disappointing in my opinion, probably the weakest part of the movie, but I still really enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun to watch through.
Yeah, and I think this is like we've criticized Kai before for having pacing that's too fast. There's a couple moments in this where I almost feel like it's that way, but by the end I didn't care. It's all just in it feels like they're really just jamming through an excuse to fight some people, and I'm okay with that. And I was never bored the entire time. It's 40 minutes of entertainment, whether it was the best entertainment or not the best entertainment, it's up to you, but I mean, I had a good time. Honestly, this is one where I don't know. I had this thought earlier, like kind of like my would I watch it again? Would you if this was suddenly in movie theaters, would you buy a ticket to go see it?
I think I would. I think it would be cool to see it on the big screen, kind of get like that, especially watching like those minion fights on the big screen and just get like that full take in on a much larger screen. And yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's 40 minutes. I don't think it would be a waste of time.
Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat where because I had to kind of gauge like, okay, I don't dislike it, but how much do I like it? And yeah, I would pay a few bucks to go watch it on the big screen. I thought it was entertaining enough, and I would definitely watch it again.
I agree with you. I think we're kind of on the same page about this one. I think we've touched on most of our points about the movie, but I wanted to kind of circle back to briefly what our little what if discussion here of what do you think would have happened if the minions and Garlic Jr. succeeded in killing Piccolo at the very beginning, thus creating a sequence of events where Piccolo dying means Kami dies, means the Dragon Balls are inert, means Garlic Jr. cannot wish for immortality.
Ooh, that is very interesting. The funny part is I don't know how. I don't think if things play out much differently, assuming that well, then Garlic doesn't steal Gohan, which means that Goku's not involved. Um, yeah, if the Dragon Balls become inert, then Garlic's not doing anything.
I mean, he's at that point he's kind of already gotten his revenge against Kami for Garlic Senior, but it still kind of felt like I still kind of got the impression that whether it be Garlic Senior or Garlic Junior, that they wanted to kind of like take over the world or subjugate the world. So I guess from my perspective, if that ends up being the course that Garlic Jr. takes, kind of we'll say the Demon King Piccolo route, effectively, he's going to still come into conflict with Goku, most likely, right? And I mean, the interesting thing about that to me, though, is that the impression that I get from this movie is Garlic Jr. in his big form, honestly, he takes on Piccolo and Goku together, almost beating them by himself. Only when they kind of take off their weighted clothing are they even able to really match him together. So you kind of get the impression that Garlic Jr. in his big form is stronger than Goku solo. So, I mean, I'd be curious to see what that fight looks like. I feel like Goku loses that fight, honestly.
I mean, it would almost have to turn into, I guess, like the situation with Vegeta during the Saiyan saga, right? Where it kind of has to be this fight by committee where we get that explosive moment from Gohan and Krillin's lending a hand, and then I don't know, maybe Yajirobe jumps in at the right time and gets in a sneaky stab somewhere or something like that, where it's not just Goku winning the fight. Because you're right, when we saw Garlic fighting both of them, it was almost overwhelming. The question I have though is what's the power difference between Garlic and Goku when his weighted clothes are off? Because Garlic was fighting both of them with weights on, And then when they took him off, it seemed like they more or less had Garlic kind of outmatched. It's kind of hard to tell because it's so brief. Um, so I don't think the chasm is as massive as it seemed like when Goku had the weighted clothing on, but he definitely would need help.
Yeah. No, I very much agree with you. I would say, I mean, comparing it to like your comparison to the Vegeta part is good. I think comparing it back to Raditz, I don't think that the chasm in power is anywhere near the chasm between like Goku and Raditz, for instance. I think it would be, oh, I don't know. This guy's maybe like half a Raditz, three quarters of a Raditz.
See, I thought the question you're going to ask is, what if Kame dies during, or Piccolo and Kame die during this movie, and it's canon as we go into the Dragon Ball Z series, and now Piccolo isn't there to help Goku against Raditz. What does Goku do?
See, that would be interesting. Kami would almost have to die. That would be weird. But yeah, let's just say that the events of this movie kind of go that way, but with Kami dying. I mean, Goku would basically have to fight Raditz alone. I mean, that would almost have to turn into, again, like, if Krillin helps, I mean, if Gohan helps in his own way that he did anyway.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because at the end of Dragon Ball, no one is even on like the same level as Piccolo aside from Goku. Like,
right.
Piccolo's toying with Tien. Krillin's not even like in the same stratosphere. It's basically just Goku and just Piccolo, very well established as like the two strongest fighters on Earth. Now, a few years pass between that event and Raditz showing up, or even Garlic showing up, because it seems like there's not a big time jump from Garlic to Raditz. So things could change. You get some area to kind of play around in. It almost seems like Krillin's powered up at least a decent amount between the end of Dragon Ball and the Garlic movie. Like, he's able to actually kind of chip in against the henchmen a little bit.
Here's an interesting thought. So the way that Raditz gets killed is Goku holding Raditz while Piccolo gives him the special beam cannon. I'd be curious. We don't really...
Destructo disc chopped right in half.
That's what I was going to say. We don't really know.
It's much more gory if Krillin's there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I think the Destructo disc, the first time we see it, is against Nappa, right? Isn't that correct?
That sounds right. I think that's correct.
So we don't really know necessarily if Krillin has developed that technique when Raditz shows up or not, but there's nothing to say that he doesn't have that technique there, right? So yeah, absolutely. Almost the same sequence of events could happen with Krillin, and Krillin using the Destructo disc.
So I like it. If things play out just slightly differently, Goku and Raditz get chopped in half.
I mean, the problem then is there are no Dragon Balls, so then Goku's not coming back.
That's rough. Oh, all right. So there we go. All right. So I think that's more or less my entire thoughts of this movie. Just to kind of just put a pin on it. I enjoyed it. Was it the best movie? No, but I'd watch it again. I had a lot of fun. The pacing was great. The final fight could have been a little bit better, but overall it was a good time. Actually, really happy with it. My expectations were a little low, and it far exceeded them.
That's good. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. This one, I do like this one a lot. I think that it didn't quite meet past Todd's expectations, but it still was very fun to watch through. I think that a younger Todd my expectations were maybe lower as a kid or teenager, but it still has really cool fight sequences. I really enjoyed what there is there. I'm just a little bit more critical as an old man, I guess.
Maybe the memory grew a little bit too far outside of proportion for this movie to have lived up to it.
That's probably a big part of it too. But yeah, beyond the little what if tangent I took us on, did you have anything else you wanted to discuss about this one, Dayton?
No, and if you're anyone who's like me and hasn't seen it, go give it a watch. It's 40 minutes. It's quick. It's fun.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But that's going to be it for this episode of Instant Transmission, where we discuss everything Dragon Ball. This has been your host, Todd.
And Dayton.
Don't forget, we are on Patreon and Twitter. If you want to make our power pole extend, you can find us at patreon.com/ITDBpodcast, stands for Instant Transmission Dragon Ball Podcast, and over on Twitter at x.com/ITDBpodcast. Please like, review, subscribe, rate, however all that stuff works on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to us on. And thank you so much for your support. Be sure to join us next time as we cover something else related to Dragon Ball.
Yeah!
We've got a few ideas brewing in Baba's Cauldron, and we might be adjusting the format of our content in the near future to offer Dayton and I a little bit more creative freedom. So stay tuned. Will we journey to the frozen north to thwart the plans of a mad scientist? Perhaps we'll become spectators at a multiverse tournament. Or will the best Dragon Ball hairdo keep us up at night? Find out next time. And to all our fellow Dragon Ball fans, stay safe out there, and remember to keep rocking the dragon.
Dude, this episode's getting fucking pulled. I'm calling it right now.